So we are starting with adding my golden chicken. So the first thing I did was I opened up 7-zip here, which just lets me access the inside of a jar file. In IntelliJ, I found where the chicken assets and stuff are, so I'm just following that path here. So I'm in the jar file in Minecraft, in textures, in entity, and then I scrolled down here a ways and I found chicken.png. So that there is the default chicken texture. So I opened that in Blockbench actually, and I also opened the golden chest. So I copied it using 7-zip out of there into someplace I can work on it, and I copied also the gold chest plate item texture. And then I essentially used the picker to grab the colors off of the gold chest plate and used the bucket tool in Bitbucket with colors selected to just straight switch. So I switched the lightest white to the kind of yellowest color in the chest plate. I switched the kind of grays to shades of yellow from the chest plate, and then I used the darker colors around the edge of the chest plate, the item border, to dye the beak. I left the eyes black. I left these two little nostril marks on the nose. That's the like wattle or crop or whatever that thing's called. So I just left that red. I'm not totally sure about that as a choice. I left their feet alone. Chickens are a little weird, actually, I figured out. I had never noticed it in game before. But as it turns out, where's my picture? So, as it turns out, chicken feet don't have any depth. Look at these. So, it's just the colors on the bottom and a row of pixels up the back. But there's no thickness to chicken feet in Minecraft. Yeah, didn't know that. Weird. Anyway, so I've got my chicken texture, and now I'm looking to add this thing to the game. So let's start that whole process. All right. So as we look at adding our new chicken to the mod, I've got my mod code here. I also have open these 3 files, and the way I got those 3 files is I double tapped Shift, which brings up the searcher. I searched for chicken and I included non-package items, and then I looked for the chicken Java class that's in entity animal. I looked for the chicken model and the chicken renderer. There's also things like chicken JSON. So, we should open. Let's see, we should probably open chicken.json. So this is the one as an entity as opposed to the chicken item, right? I don't really need to modify the chicken item in any way. And I saw another one that was chicken food.json, and I'm not totally sure what that... So these are apparently the things that you can feed a chicken. Interestingly, I did not, and I had forgotten that you can feed chicken more than wheat seeds. So I may have to change my my mod a little bit to include these other things as options for my new chicken. But these are the things that I am gonna kind of need to set up. So this is the looting mechanic here. So this is essentially the drop table for a chicken. So we can see that there's some stuff about dropping feathers. So we've got feather here. Let's see, what else? I think we should have the chicken item itself there. So these are, this is code that I might change if I wanted to change the drop table for my chicken. As my mod is currently organized, or my idea for my mod is currently organized, I am not planning on killing golden chickens to get spawn eggs. However, if I have to abandon that for some reason, this is what I'm going to be changing. So I think it's good for me to have this somewhere. So it is a really useful thing to do if you're looking to make a mob that's a bit like a mob that's already in the game, which is absolutely what I would recommend for a first mob, right? Don't get crazy, like copy something. And copying something is made a lot easier by the fact that you can just grab the vanilla code. So here we can just go ahead and look at what's in the vanilla code, right? So we've got our these are our class variables. Here's our constructor. We've got a register goals method that lets it do some stuff. So it's got floating is important. That's floating, not like the Java word float, but floating like in water. That keep if you don't have this one in your mob, it'll sink to the bottom and then drown. So we've got in priority, right? Lowest being immediate things, highest being least immediate things. So our chicken, like the vanilla chicken, its first goal is to float. Its second goal is to panic, which I guess means that if you hit a chicken in the water, it won't run away from you. That's interesting. I've never tried that. There's a breeding goal, which means that if it's panicking, it won't breed. There's tempting, which is the follow distance, like to get it to follow you if you're holding wheat seeds or whatever. There's a follow parent goal, so if it's a baby, it'll follow its parent. The fact that tempt is above follow parent means that you can lure a baby chicken, right? And it's actually following you, not following its parent. There's a random stroll that avoids the chicken getting wet. There's a look at player, and there's a randomly look around. So if you're close to a chicken, it'll tend to look at you instead of looking around randomly. But again, these are kind of tendencies. And then we've got some other stuff. So dimensions, there's like if it's a baby, then it gets baby dimensions, and otherwise it gets its adult dimensions. We've got a thing that creates some attributes for our chicken. That's important because if you don't have attributes associated to your mob, it won't appear at all. And then we've got AI steps. So this is like, what does it do? A lot of this. So super AI step is just calling the animal AI because chicken extends the animal class, right? So the first thing it's doing is calling the AI step for animals. And then the next thing it's doing is like a whole bunch of stuff that's specific to chickens. And really what chickens, like the specific to chicken stuff they do is they flap and they lay eggs. So like that's all of what's in the AI step there. Then we've got some like flapping stuff, we've got some sound stuff, we've got some breed stuff. So this you'll notice when you breed chickens, it creates a chicken. That's the part that I'm gonna try to change. We'll see how that goes. I'm not totally sure I'm gonna be able to do that, but like that's what I'm gonna be working on. And then we've got so like, is something food? Some like basic stuff here. Then we've got chicken jockey stuff and positioning riders and stuff. So some very specific stuff for chicken jockeys. Okay. And then in model, we've got a whole bunch of model stuff. Luckily, I'm going to be able to just because I'm making a copy of a chicken with a reskin, I'm just going to be able to copy all of the model code and not change any of it at all, which is good for me. If you're wanting to make a custom model, it's challenging. You can make them in Blockbench. Blockbench can export this model file. You probably won't have to change it a ton, but there is a bit of like cleanup that you'll have to do to it because of the varying versions of Minecraft. Blockbench generates code for a slightly older version at the moment. And then I've got a renderer, which like essentially renders the chicken. So this has some like render stuff. Great, cool. So those are the files I'm going to need to kind of copy. So let's get started making some folder structure. Okay, so the folder structure we're going to need to make is going to be under example mod here. So find net u example mod, right click here, we're going to make a new package. Our package is going to be called entity. Make sure you spell that correctly. And then inside of entity, we're going to need two more packages. Those are going to be called client and custom. So notice those are both appearing in the same level. And then we're going to need to create some, oops, I don't need that showing. We're going to need to create some files in. And then underneath custom here, we're going to create a new Java class that we're going to call Golden Chicken Entity. And then here's where we're going to copy a bunch of code. So I have my chicken.java here. I've got my Golden Chicken Entity code here. It would be very reasonable for you to write something here like this extends animal. The chicken already extends animal, so I'm basically just going to copy that code over. It would also be really reasonable for you to be looking at me and say, Joe, why aren't you just extending the chicken class and making the golden chicken a new kind of chicken? That's an absolutely reasonable approach, and my only reason for doing it is that I think I'm going to want the way the golden chicken interacts with jockeys to be pretty different than the way the regular chicken interacts with being a jockey. So I'm really going to want to remove all of the jockey code or at least change it substantially. And then if I extend chicken, if Minecraft changes the default behavior of a chicken, it'll change the way my golden chickens behave if I haven't overridden that method. I think it's cleaner for me to just override, for me to extend animal by copying a bunch of chicken code. That said, this is definitely not the only way to do this. You can approach this problem a number of different ways, and like a lot of those ways are going to be basically reasonable. So here I'm getting this thing about we need some stuff. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do with my chicken code. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab everything inside of chicken, and I'm actually going to do that really a lazy way. I'm going to grab everything from line 2 down so I get the imports as well. So that's got everything except this line at the top about which package we're in. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to paste all that stuff. I'm going to notice here that there's a problem. So problem is all my imports are feeling jacked up. My imports are feeling jacked up because my golden chicken entity class isn't defined, and there's instead this other class. So, oh, we've got a bunch of redundant imports too. Okay, so I'm just going to take this guy and I'm going to cut this name out of it. Oops. And I'm going to delete that original. And then we've got a whole bunch of redundant imports. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all that. Here I'm going to put my class name in there. And now it's going to be telling me there's no way to make one of these. And that's really just because I haven't changed this name. So here we're going to change the constructor name to Golden Chicken Entity. And that should have everything like basically cleaned up. I've got some imports that are a bit dorked here. But you know what? Let's just collapse all of our imports and then we don't have to worry about it, right? We could spend a second and very carefully copy and paste all the imports out of chicken again. That's probably a good idea. I'll do that off camera. So here I've got my chicken default code. Now this is exact, like my golden chicken right now is going to be an exact behavior of a chicken in every way. The reason I'm doing it this way is I'm going to make sure the silly thing works before I start changing a bunch of code in it. So my next thing I'm going to do is we're going to create the model and the renderer files. Those will take a second. Let's go do that next. Okay, so before we go create the next file, we really need to actually get our registration stuff working. So we're going to go into modded entities here, and we're going to need to create a deferred register, of course. So we need a public static final deferred register. And our deferred register needs to be made out of entity type. And in order to get this to work, we're going to put a question mark here. And then we're going to say, this thing I want to name entity. Gosh, I'm going to say the word entity so many times in this. And it's one of those, like, if you repeat it enough times, it doesn't look like it's spelled right. So I'm going to make an entity types deferred register called entity types. And this is going to be a deferred register that we're creating from a Forge registries dot entity types, and needs to have our example mod why am I not getting dot mod ID? Let's see. What's our mod ID is just called mod ID. Okay, let's see. Why are we complaining about this? Can't resolve. The file is called example mod with capital E, capital M. Silly Joe. It's not the folder name, it's the file name. What? Yes, you can. Don't be like that. Oh, yeah, I want to import that class. Come on. Okay, so there's our deferred register created. And then our other thing we want to do is we want to make a public static void method called register. Because of course we do. And this needs to take an event bus, of course, and we'll call that event bus. And then what do we need to do with the event bus? We need to add it to the register so that it indeed gets registered. Okay, so that's essentially tying our, that's going to tie our entity types deferred register to our event bus. We're obviously going to have to go in here and add that to our process. So let's do that next. So what we need to do here is we need to, let's see, add. So here we're going to add the entities. And we're going to do that by doing mod entities dot register, and we want to register our mod event bus. So this is adding our entities from our mod entities to the game. Okay, so registration complete. Next file. So the last thing we need to do with this is go back into mod entities, and so far we've created our registry and we've created a way to register it, but we haven't ever added our new mob to our registry. So here we want to go in and we want to do, I want a public static final, and this is going to be a registry object method that I'm creating. A registry object returning method that I'm creating. And this is going to be of entity type. And then my entity type is going to be golden chicken entity. And we're going to call this golden chicken. Okay, and what we need in here is we need to say our golden chicken is going to equal an entity types, oops, not the right thing, entity types dot register. So we're registering our chicken, and first things first, we need a name. So our name is going to be, nope, it's going to be golden chicken. I want to accidentally remake the regular chicken. Okay, and then we need a supplier here, so that's going to be an empty set of parens, making a lambda function, and we want to do entity type dot build, dot builder dot of, and then we need to supply our constructor, so that's going to be in golden chicken entity :new. That's giving us a new chicken. And our mob category needs to be creature. So mob category, there's a bunch of different options there. You saw some of them. When this auto completes, right, we do mob category dot, and then there's a whole bunch of options here. There's the ambient creatures, that's like bats and whatnot. There's axolotls. There's creatures, which are basically the passive mobs in the game. There's monsters. There's some underwater creatures. There's some ambient creatures and whatever. I'm going to go with creature because my chicken should be counted as a passive mob. Let's see. Oops. Okay. Dot. And then we can do sized, so we can change our chicken size. So I looked it up, and a default chicken is 0.4 wide and 0.7 high. And I think that golden chicken should be a bit bigger, so I'm going to do 0.6 and 1. And these are going to need to get float values, I think, on them. So let me check that 1 second. Yep, float values on them. And then here we need to do dot build. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes on the screen. And then this needs a name. So this is going to be a golden chicken. Okay, let's see if we got everything. Okay, no instance of type variables exists, so that golden chicken entity conforms to chicken. Give me a second to figure this out. Okay, so here's the issue. My golden chicken entity new, when I create that, it says that the entity type that it's receiving ought to extend the regular chicken. And I don't want it to extend the regular chicken, right? I want it to extend the golden chicken entity. And this is the wrong place now. So we can't we can't make a chicken this way. That was me copying code, right? So we can just say that it extends golden chicken entity. That way, if we create child classes of golden chicken entity, this constructor will still work. Okay, so now we should be good to go, except for my forgotten semicolon sorted. Cool. If you're making your own new mobs, it should be noted there's one thing I haven't changed in here. And that one thing that I haven't changed right now is that in my event offspring, so the event offspring method for my golden chickens right now returns a regular chicken. It also uses the regular chicken food. So right now, these are not done, right? I haven't finished the behaviors that I wanted. So far, these are a regular chicken that I've called something else, and I really haven't changed anything about them. And I'm really not going to. Like, to start with, I'm just going to get reskinned chickens working. My advice to you, don't get too ambitious with everything you're changing. Change a couple of things at a time. It makes your life way easier, especially when you're learning. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to go into client and I'm going to need to create a renderer and a model file for my golden chicken. So we're going to make two classes and they're going to be called golden chicken model, and the other one is going to be called golden chicken renderer. And I really wish I had an example to look out for that spelling. Renderer. Great. Okay, cool. I have spelled things correctly. Good to go. Okay, so my next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at chicken model, and I'm just going to scoot this over a bit. Let's see, things I don't need open right now. I don't need mod entities. I don't need my chicken itself. I don't really need my example code. Okay, I don't need either of those. All right, so I've got my chicken model code. So this is all of the model code straight out of vanilla, right? So let me look through this and see if there's anything that I'm going to have problems with. So this is creating a whole bunch of model parts. That should all be fine. There's a whole bunch of head, body, part stuff. Okay, that should all be fine. I've got some layer definitions. Okay, that should all be basically fine. Okay, I'm not changing any of the way my model works. So I'm literally going to grab everything in here except for that package line. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to pay a little bit of attention here. So it's going to be a class chicken model, and there's a constructor called chicken model. When I go in here, I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm going to need to change two things. We're going to need to say that we want a golden chicken model, and that our constructor is a golden chicken model. And then should have all of our errors disappear. That's good to go. I've got my chicken model completely defined. Done with that one. And because I'm not changing anything, this was really chill. All right, so in order to make our renderer work, I'm going to need to do two things. One is I need to put a file somewhere. So the first thing I did here was I added a entity folder to my textures file, or textures folder in my resources folder. And then I dragged my golden chicken PNG in there. So that looks like this guy. And now in order to make the renderer work, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab all the code out of the default chicken renderer, and I'm going to paste it in here on top of my golden chicken renderer. Now, this is going to kick a bunch of errors. I got a bunch of stuff to change. So I'm going to need to change this to be a golden chicken renderer. And then I'm going to need to use the words golden chicken a lot, so I'm just putting those in my clipboard. Here we're going to swap chicken for golden chicken entity. Then here we're going to make a golden chicken model. And this is going to need to have a golden chicken entity in it. Then here I'm going to need to make a golden chicken renderer. Here we're going to make a new golden chicken model. golden chicken model there. I'm going to need to tweak that a little bit. And I also need to change the word chicken here to be golden chicken. And then, as it turns out, this getBob method is depreciated, so we're just going to delete that. We don't need that. Okay. So in order to get our events working, we're going to need to create ourselves a event folder here. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new package, and this is going to be called event. And then we're going to need a couple of files in here. So I'm going to need a new class that's going to be called mod events. That's going to be our first one. And we're going to need another Java class called mod event bus events. Okay, and these are going to let us create both mod events and things with the mod bus, which is how I'm going to tie these things together. Okay, I'm going to have to cut these down later. So I think that I'm going to need to add a layer location variable to my model class here. So I'm making this public static final mob layer location. Why are you not importing? Oh, because it's not mod, it's model layer location. Model layer location that we're going to call layer location is going to be a new model layer location made out of a new resource location. New resource location. Assume that's supposed to be model resource location. And we're going to do here dot from. No, we're not. Fuck. Okay, so it's a new model layer location from a new resource location. Dot from. Why are you not understanding that? Resource location dot from namespace and path, and we need to give it our mod ID, so we'll do example mod dot mod ID, and then we'll need a comma and frickin' golden chicken here. And then we'll need main there. Okay, so let's parse that out a little bit. Why not? Why can't you resolve that? I got it from autocomplete. Oh, yep. I don't need the new. Because it's not a constructor, it's creating a, yep. Okay, cool. Good. So that should work. Now we need to use that in a couple of spots. So we need to go into our chicken renderer here, and instead of doing model layers dot chicken, which relies on the vanilla version, we're going to do here golden chicken renderer dot layer location. Oh, not golden chicken renderer, golden chicken model dot layer location. Okay, so that should get our layers tied to our renderer, but we still need to use the renderer. And now we need to go into our mod event bus and start writing some code in there. Okay, so in our mod event bus events, we'll need to add to the top of this that this is a mod dot event bus subscriber. Oops, why is there a parenthesis there? I don't want that. Mod event bus subscriber that needs to take in the mod ID is equal to our example mod dot mod ID and comma bus is equal to mod dot event bus subscriber dot bus dot mod. Okay. And then in here, so inside of our events, we need an @subscribe event. And then what we need in there is a public static void register layers method. And that registers layer method is going to take entity renderers entity renderers event dot register layer definitions event, and in there we need to do event dot register layer definitions, and then we want to do golden chicken model dot layer location and golden chicken model create body layer. And then one more, another @subscribe event that's going to be public static void. It's going to be called register attributes. That's going to need our entity attribute creation event, so this guy here, that we'll call event. And then what we need to do with that is we need to do event dot put, and here we have to do mod entities dot let's see, our entity is called golden chicken and we want to get it. And then the next thing we'll want here is golden chicken entity dot create attributes dot build. And this should tie all of our everything together. Okay, and one last thing, we have to go into our example mod Java file, and then down here into our client mod events, we want to do on client setup. We'll need to do entity renderers dot register, and we need to go into mod entities dot golden chicken dot get, and we need to supply that with which renderer is supposed to be attached to the golden chicken entity. So that's going to be golden chicken renderer new. So that should supply, this is essentially tying the golden chicken entity to the golden chicken renderer. And that should, hopefully, fingers crossed, let us actually summon one of these. Alright, so let's see. Moment of truth here. I've tried this a couple of times. I've gotten some neat crashes out of it. So let's see what we got. So I'm going to summon a golden chicken. And here I have a golden chicken. You can see the texture is not working. You can see something about the flap animation is real fucked up. But that's an entity, and it's walking around doing chicken stuff. So I feel like that's a plus. So I do happen to know what the issue was there. I have here textures entity golden chicken. I needed a file extension on that. So if we run it with goldenchicken.png, then we'll wait a second and get this running. And as soon as we spawn in here, we see that our golden chicken is indeed working. So look at how cute he looks. I definitely have to fix that animation, but I'm going to call this a pretty strong success for the moment. I've got my reskin chicken made, and now I can control the code. So now I can go in and start fixing those things, like trying to get it to drop a spawn egg when it breeds, or trying to get it to produce a golden chicken when it breeds, or fixing the food. Like, all of that stuff I can now start to address, and I wasn't able to start addressing that kind of stuff before. So now I've got my entity in. First things first, we'll probably have to fix that flap animation. I'm actually not totally sure what's wrong with that, but we'll figure it out. I will catch you guys on the next one. Alright, little late addendum. I fixed the flapping animation that I was having trouble with. So here's what I did. So I went down into the setup animation method, and I looked here, and earlier these had something about age and ticks. So I modified them to use the variables that are actually in the entity. So the flapping variable that's actually up here in entity. But it whined at me about doing that because T is a P entity, not necessarily a golden chicken. So I went up here to the top of my chicken model class and said, my chicken model class is about T, which is extending a golden chicken entity instead of, before I think this just said entity. So now it knows that T is a golden chicken entity, and golden chickens have that flapping property. So that's why they were spinning round and round and round, was because they didn't know that they were supposed to be a chicken-like thing. They were just using generic entity code, and they didn't have that flapping property. So, fixed. Cool. Kind of a pain in the butt, honestly. That is apparently a question that has plagued people for at least 9 years. I was psyched to find a fix for it. This is the kind of thing that AI is actually useful-ish for. Still took me like 20 minutes. Alright, catch you later.